In his mind, he saw her wedding day, standing at the front of a church as she made her way down the aisle. But when her father lifted the veil, there was no face beneath it. The case began as a house fire, but that fire was concealing a murder, which in turn masked the abduction of 2 teenage girls. A glance upward revealed something on the floor above. It was instantly, undeniably, the body of a man. According to official statements, there were no suspects, but the family believed there was one primary person of interest: the entire Craig County Sheriff's Department. While a storm of rumors began to swirl around the 2 missing teenagers, a darker narrative emerged. One of a conspiracy involving local police and area drug rings, with connections stretching all the way to the Mexican cartel. Feeling utterly alone, the Bible family realized they would have to find the girls themselves and bring the men responsible for their vanishing to justice. He posed a question to her: "Were you not scared to talk to me?" To which she replied, "Nope." She was a mother, and she wanted to find her child. She was prepared to do whatever it took to bring her home. Before the story continues, there is a question to consider. Have you ever searched for your own name online? In under a minute, a person's phone number, address, and social media profiles can be found, accessible to anyone who looks. To shield oneself from this type of exposure typically requires a person to personally scrub the internet and fight back on their own. It's a process that can take hours, demanding that you complete non-contact forms and pursue the hackers and data brokers who have pried their way into your private life. This is why we are pleased to introduce this video's sponsor, Aura, the Comprehensive Identity Protection Service. It handles all the necessary steps to purge your private information from the internet and even tracks down the robocallers who may have plagued you for years. The service alerts you if anyone attempts to access your social security or phone number online, and it also monitors your credit to ensure no one has cloned or stolen your financial cards. For anyone concerned about their personal information falling into the wrong hands, there is good news. Aura is providing unseen viewers with a 2-week free trial of the service. Use the link in the description at aura.com/unseen to receive a 14-day free trial of Aura and begin securing your identity today. After investigating so many terrifying stories rooted in the internet and the violation of privacy, we understand that taking action sooner is always better than later. Our thanks to Aura for sponsoring this video. We now return to the case of Ashley and Lauria. In their youth, Ashley's family, the Freemans, lived merely a mile away from Lauria and the Bibles. The girls first met in kindergarten, where they formed an immediate friendship that would only deepen as they grew older. It was a bond they forged early on, one that carried them into high school. As teenagers, their lives were deeply intertwined. Lauria was a cheerleader for Ashley's basketball team, and the two were more inseparable than ever, seeming to share the same thoughts. It was the kind of deep connection where one person could easily finish a sentence that the other had started. On December 29th, only a few days after Christmas, Ashley invited Lauria to her home for her 16th birthday, a request her father, Jay, could not refuse. He recalled seeing them pull into the driveway, watching his daughter run into the house to ask if she could spend the night with Ashley. He told her she needed to be home by noon. Her last words to him were, "I love you, Daddy," and then she was out the door. The thought of danger never crossed his mind. By all accounts, Lauria and Ashley spent a wonderful night at the Freeman's home, enjoying pizza and ice cream and watching movies. From the inside, everything appeared perfectly normal. But in the darkness outside their home, someone was watching. At 6 a.m. the next day, a call came into the police from the neighbors. The Freeman house was on fire. Just 2 hours after that, a deputy from the Craig County Sheriff's Department entered the workplace of Lauria's mother. His first question was chillingly direct. "Do you know Ashley Freeman?" She replied, "Yes, she's my daughter's best friend. In fact, Lauria stayed last night with the Freemans." The deputy's words were stark. "Lauren, the house is totally gone." Lauren and Jay rushed to the smoldering scene, where the county sheriff informed them that both girls were missing. Their only concern was for the girls. The who or what of the situation was irrelevant. The only question that mattered was, where could they find them? Lorene then joined the medical examiner, where she had to identify the body of Kathy Freeman, Ashley's mother, which had been discovered in the ruins. When the county coroner arrived at the scene, a single question was posed. "Is that Kathy?" The official couldn't provide a 100% confirmation, but offered chilling details. The victim had a ring on her left hand and had borne children. That was enough. "That's Kathy." The certainty was immediately followed by a wave of dread. "So where is Danny?" Where are the two girls? While this grim identification was taking place, Lauria's father was combing the property on horseback. He made a discovery. Empty shotgun shells lay near the home. A horrifying theory began to take shape. This wasn't merely a tragic fire. This was the scene of Ashley's mother's murder. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the OSBI, was brought in to process the scene and collect what was left for evidence. The OSBI held complete authority over the burgeoning investigation. At the end of a long day, their lead investigator, Steve Nutter, finally approached Lorene and Jay. The investigators, he told them, were 100% certain that nothing else remained to be found in the wreckage. So, at 5 o'clock, the Freeman house was officially released from state control and turned back over to the families. Jay and Lorene returned to their own home around 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, where Lauria's bedroom sat empty, directly across the hall from their own. The psychological torment of knowing a child is not where she belongs is immense. Was she somewhere in the cold, freezing to death? Was she hungry? Did she have any clothes? A parent's mind begins to turn on itself. How can you eat when your child may be starving? How is sleep possible when you don't know where your child is? Following a sleepless night, the Bibles were compelled to return to the crime scene, clinging to a desperate hope of finding a clue. Lorene was convinced the police had overlooked something crucial. She stepped into the still smoking ruins of the house. She scanned the debris, her eyes adjusting to the devastation, when she noticed something lying on the floor above. There was no mistaking it, the body of a man. His face was gone, completely gone. She called 911, stated her name and her location at the Freeman property, and delivered the shocking news. There's another body in this fire. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. The official experts had left a body behind in the fire. Even before Agent Nutter and the OSBI returned, Lorene, Jay, and Ashley's uncle, Dwayne Vansell, uncovered more evidence inside the house. They found Lauria's purse, her wallet, and a car insurance card that belonged to a total stranger. But when they attempted to hand their findings to Nutter, he rejected them outright. His response was laced with dismissal. What the hell makes you think that insurance verification card has anything to do with this investigation? He then turned and simply walked away. As Lorene and Jay resumed their search of the home's remains, Dwayne hurried after Agent Nutter. He explained that he was able to identify the body they had discovered. It was his stepbrother, Danny, who was Ashley's father, recognizable only because of a metal plate in his skull. The information troubled Nutter, whose primary theory was built on the idea that Danny had murdered his wife Kathy and then fled with the girls. But Dwayne had a different theory, one his stepbrother had shared with him in confidence, merely a week before the fire. He recalled Danny's words, "If anything ever happens to me, you look at the sheriff's department." When asked what he meant, Danny's intensity grew. He had looked him directly in the eye and said, "I'm telling you, if I get killed, you look at the sheriff's department." Dwayne explained that a year earlier, a deputy had been involved in an altercation that resulted in the death of Danny's son, Shane. In the time since, a deep and bitter animosity had grown between the Freemans and the local sheriff's department. Nutter, though skeptical, consented to investigate the sheriff and his deputies. Official reports would later state that the department investigated the potential involvement of members of the sheriff's office. They administered lie detector tests, which the deputies reportedly passed, indicating no connection to the incident. With Danny's body identified and the sheriff's department seemingly cleared, this new development had dire implications. Investigator Nutter turned his professional suspicion toward the least expected party. He began to look at the girls themselves. Almost overnight, the official narrative shifted dramatically. The theory of Danny as a murderer who had abducted the girls was gone. The authorities were now pushing a new and startling explanation. The girls did this. As a direct result of being classified as suspects, no Amber Alert was ever issued for Lauria and Ashley. Nutter assured the Bibles he had placed the girls' names in the National Missing Person database, but by then, Lorene's trust in him was gone. To get confirmation, she drove to the police station, where an officer she was acquainted with offered to check the system for her. After a moment, he looked up from his screen with a chilling update. The girls, he told Lorene, were not in the system. While the town was certain the teenagers were victims, Investigator Nutter and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation remained fixated on their original theory. The official narrative that Lauria and Ashley set the fire and vanished was a story Lorene immediately dismissed as impossible. She knew her daughter would never willingly leave her mother's side. Even for someone trying to keep an open mind, she found the proposition to be utterly unbelievable. With law enforcement seemingly pursuing a dead end, Lorene and Bible felt they had been left with no alternative but to spearhead the investigation themselves. They mobilized family and friends, forming their own search parties that combed the county for clues and distributed homemade missing person posters. In the family's view, any official claims of a search were hollow. They felt they were the only ones truly looking. The inertia was unbearable. They were compelled to take action. They even designed large-scale posters specifically for the back of semi-trucks, hoping to spread the girls' faces across the country. He and Lorene logged hundreds of thousands of miles, a relentless pilgrimage to place their daughter's images in any window that would have them. A full year slipped by, yielding no breakthroughs and no answers. As the holidays neared, Lorene braced for the family's first Christmas without their daughter, a season Lauria had always adored. It had always been Lauria who decorated their tree. The void she left during that first Christmas was a palpable, crushing presence. In a gesture of defiant hope, her aunt and uncle refused to take down their Christmas tree. The family decided the tree would stay up until Lauria came home, because in the landscape of the heart, her return was an inevitability. Over the next year, hope began to erode around the family. Yet Lorene's resolve to find Lauria and Ashley never wavered. She harbored a fierce, unshakable conviction that they were still alive somewhere. When a child vanishes from the face of the earth, many wonder how a parent finds the will to continue. For Lorene, the motivation was primal. The only thing more terrifying than the search was the thought of being a parent who stopped looking. Around this time, a dark cloud of rumors began to gather around Ashley's father, Danny Freeman. Word on the street was that he was trying to amass a large sum of money to fund a lawsuit against the sheriff responsible for his son's death. To raise the funds, he had allegedly turned to selling drugs and growing marijuana in the months before the fire. The whispers claimed Danny had fallen into debt with dangerous people and had failed to pay them what he owed. The theory was that his creditors had come to collect, but this was a lead investigator nutter and the OSBI flatly ignored. The official assessment was that a drug-related motive did not align with the known facts of the case. From their perspective, the absolute last thing perpetrators of a murder would do is complicate the crime by abducting two witnesses. Disregarding the official opinion entirely, Lorene took matters into her own hands, seeking out an individual with connections high up the criminal chain. She reasoned that this approach would allow her to bypass the street-level players and communicate directly with the person in charge. This contact pointed her toward the Miami, Oklahoma chapter of the Mexican cartel. As a mother determined to find her child, no risk was too great. Her mind was made up. Over the strenuous objections of her husband and family, she resolved to meet with the cartel herself. Jay's mother pleaded with her to abandon the idea, warning her that risking her life would not bring Lauria back. When asked what she would do if they shot at her, Lorene's response was chilling. If they start shooting, she reasoned, it must mean she was getting close. Lorene pulled her pickup truck into a darkened alley in Miami, the prearranged location for the meeting. She waited for hours until a vehicle appeared. When the man got out, she slowly walked toward him. He challenged her immediately, asking how she knew he wasn't carrying a weapon. She met his gaze and asked him the very same question. Her fearlessness seemed to register with him. He asked if she wasn't scared to be talking to him. She replied that she was not, and that she needed to know one thing: if his people had taken the girls because Danny Freeman owed him money. The man's answer was direct. He told her his organization operated by two principles: they did not harm women, and they did not harm children. Lorene believed him without reservation. She was back at square one. The Bibles continued their relentless search until a series of tips painted a new and deeply disturbing picture. 12 separate confidential informants suggested the girls were still alive, but were being held in appalling conditions. The family began hearing stories about the existence of photographs that showed the girls bound and gagged. They were told the girls were being held captive, subjected to things the family could barely bring themselves to imagine. These rumors of horrific photographs became a constant, tormenting presence in their investigation. To truly contemplate the meaning of such stories was to risk a psychological collapse that would halt the search for good. Once the press revealed that Polaroid photographs of the young women had been circulating, a relentless flood of tips began to overwhelm the investigation, a circumstance that became a source of great frustration for Agent Nutter and the OSBI. The team was inundated with leads, Nutter would later recall being informed that the girls had been spotted in New Mexico and Florida on the exact same day. But there was no alternative. Lorene and Jay were obligated to pursue every single one. One investigator recalled searching across 6 states, accumulating what was likely 200,000 miles on his vehicle. This pattern of fruitless searching persisted through most of the early 2000s, with Lorene and Jay constantly on the road, while Agent Nutter meticulously sorted through the hundreds of tips his agency fielded each week. This cycle of dead ends continued until a seemingly unconnected suspect surfaced from the Polansky unit's death row in Livingston, Texas. He was the infamous serial killer, Tommy Lynn Sells, a man officially connected to more than 12 murders. His transient lifestyle had allowed him to evade capture by law enforcement for almost 15 years, leaving a chilling trail of victims across the country. The OSBI eventually made contact, explaining, "Hey, we've got this person that's in prison, and he's saying he did it." The inmate's confession was chillingly specific. "I killed Danny and Kathy, and I took the girls." Sells appeared to possess intimate knowledge of the case, even offering to lead Nutter directly to the location of Lauria and Ashley's bodies. The agent held serious reservations about the inmate, but with 5 years having passed without any progress, they had nothing to lose. A single bone was recovered at the site, and a doctor was brought in to examine it. The bone was identified as animal. Nutter had to go to the Bible family and inform them. "Tommy Sells," he told them. "He played games with us. He didn't do it." Agent Nutter's final act before his removal from the case was to investigate another serial killer, Oklahoma native Jeremy Jones. But Lorene Bible was unconvinced. "Never did I think Jeremy Jones did it," she stated, believing it would have required a group of people to remove the girls from that property. Lorene's intuition was correct. Jones's confession also proved to be false. Following this development and Nutter's departure, no new information emerged. The case went completely cold. After the Jeremy Jones lead collapsed, an eerie quiet settled over the case. They were left waiting for the next tip, for the next time someone might say something, but the silence only grew deeper. In December of 2009, Lauria's memorial Christmas tree stood in the family home, its branches weighed down by hundreds of cards and charms that Lorene had received since her daughter's disappearance. Then, the tree came crashing down. After 8, 9, 10 years, the tree had become so heavy with the accumulated weight of grief that it fell over and broke. For Lorene, it was a turning point. She couldn't bring herself to put up another tree because Lauria had always been the one to do it. After all this time, the family was forced to confront the grim reality of their situation. It was a long time before Lorene could even begin to accept the probability that the girls were no longer alive. "Sorry," she would say, choking back tears. Sometimes that just comes out of nowhere. 7 years later, a new sheriff took office in Craig County. As he and his staff were shifting old evidence crates, they happened upon an unmarked box. It was filled with forgotten documents dating back to the end of 1999, mere days after the girls had vanished. This week, Craig County Sheriff Heath Winfrey revealed that he had recently uncovered new notes and documents that had been set aside and forgotten by the previous sheriff's administration. It was a discovery that brought a new surge of hope for answers regarding what happened to Lauria and Ashley and where they might be now. Tammy Ferrari, a new agent with the OSBI, was given the task of reopening the case and digging through the newly discovered box of evidence. As she began reading through the old case file, she found a reference to an insurance card that had been located at the scene. This insurance card, one of the very first pieces of evidence found by the families, had been lost in transit between the OSBI and the old sheriff's office. By locating the card's owner, the police finally confirmed that the Polaroids were authentic. The owner not only had seen the photos, she was the ex-girlfriend of David Pennington, one of 3 men who had been distributing them. So the focus of the investigation shifted to those 3 men. They discovered that Phil Welch was already deceased. David Pennington was also deceased. But Ronnie Busick, they learned, was still alive. People who knew him said he was pure evil, that he was the devil. There were people who were just terrified of him. Ronnie Busick and his crew were known to be part of a drug ring, unconnected to any larger cartel, and were considered extremely dangerous individuals. Lorene understood the 12 people rumored to have seen the Polaroids were likely too paralyzed by fear to come forward. But investigator Ferrari was at a legal impasse. A single witness was simply not enough to convince a judge to sign a warrant. So, in a final, desperate move, the strategy shifted. Lorene launched a Facebook page, and once again faced the television cameras. By her side was Lisa Broderick, Lauria's cousin. Their shared grief, a powerful force in a renewed campaign for answers. Their message was a direct appeal to the 12 silent witnesses, to anyone who might hold a piece of the puzzle. They acknowledged the fear that held people captive, the reputation of the men involved, and conveyed a sense of understanding for their silence. They understood, but their plea was a deeply human one, asking those witnesses to look at their own children and grandchildren and to act on what they knew. The request was simple: just tell them. Help them find the girls and bring them home. It was all they wanted. They just wanted their girls back. In what felt like a miracle, the wall of silence shattered. All 12 witnesses, a network of ex-girlfriends and relatives of the three men, finally came forward. Their accounts suggested a horrifying possibility: that the girls had been kept alive for days following their abduction. More than half of the witnesses recalled seeing the chilling Polaroid photos, images of the two teenagers tied, bound, and gagged. On the very day Ronnie Busick was scheduled for release from a Kansas jail, a different reality awaited him. Investigator Ferrari was outside, holding not a release form, but an arrest warrant from Oklahoma, as the OSBI prepared to question him. He eventually constructed a narrative of what happened, meticulously crafted to avoid his own culpability. He was questioned about the Polaroid. He was asked who took the photos. He was confronted about his fear of admitting his role in the events. He was challenged to admit what he had done. Instead, he deflected all responsibility onto his now deceased accomplices. In Busick's version of the story, Welch and Pennington had gone to collect a drug debt, but Danny Freeman resisted, and the situation violently unraveled. In this telling, Danny was shot, and then Kathy was shot. The girls, he claimed, escaped through another door and fled to the back of the house. They were hiding, but once the suspects discovered them, their escape was cut short. They were caught. They were taken to Phil Welch's house in Pitcher, Oklahoma, and held there for 2 weeks, where they were subjected to torture. They were drugged, and then, ultimately, they were killed and their bodies disposed of. As a final gambit, Busick proposed a trade. He would give Ferrari the girl's location in exchange for a plea deal. The state would drop the murder, kidnapping, and arson charges if he pleaded guilty to accessory to murder, with a reduced sentence contingent on the girls being found. The Bible family accepted the agonizing deal, and together with the OSBI, they began to search the abandoned mine that Busick had indicated. There was a profound hope that they would find something, but the mine was empty. For Lorene, the devastation was absolute. Busick claimed Welch or Pennington must have moved the bodies to a different location, and in a baffling turn of events, the judge accepted his explanation. With his plea deal still in place, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 5 years of probation. On May 19, 2023, Ronnie Busick was released for good behavior, having served only 38 months behind bars. At Busick's release hearing, the courtroom was a stage for a final, painful confrontation. Lorene took the stand, delivering a poignant victim impact statement. Across the room, Busick kept his head down, refusing to meet her intense gaze. She told him that people were saying he had killed her daughter. She demanded he look her in the eye. For the family, having even part of the truth provided a strange, incomplete solace. But without the girls, there was no closure. Even armed with the terrible truth, the Bible still hold on to the faint hope of one day seeing Lauria again. She is deeply missed, but she is never forgotten. In the early days, they hoped the girls would be found alive. That hope, however faint, persists when stories emerge of others returning home after years. It is the kind of hope you always want for your child. But for Lorene, the fight continues. Last year, she joined her representative and proposed the Lauria and Ashley's Law to Congress. Its purpose is to add accessory to murder to the index of crimes that mandate an offender serve 85% of their sentence before becoming eligible for parole. The legislation was ratified on June 6, 2023, ensuring no one could exploit the same loophole that Busick had after his capture. Yet, after weathering years of frustration, rage, and profound grief, Lorene's mission has become to carry forward the girls' spirit. She founded a scholarship in their names. Her hope was that other children from the community could achieve their own ambitions in their place. This, she believes, is how the girls must be remembered, not merely for the horrific circumstances that defined their end, but for the positive force their memory continues to be in the world. She acknowledges that the details of what they may have endured can be psychologically crushing, and that it is easy to become fixated on that darkness. But that darkness was not who her daughter was. She was more than a girl who was abducted, murdered, and tortured. Her life meant more than that. Lorene recalls that Lauria had plans to attend cosmetology school. She can picture an alternate reality for her, one where she is contentedly married, living in an old farmhouse while her children run and play. As for Ashley, who loved to hunt, Lorene can just as easily envision her taking her own daughter out for the very first time. She believes they would want to be seen as something other than victims. She feels it is essential that the world see them as someone's own daughter, someone's own sister. They had dreams, just like every other young person. Lorene, now a grandmother to 3 children, recounts a recent conversation. Nana, well, you have no tree. Her granddaughter observed the absence of a Christmas tree. The little girl then declared that she would help put up the tree and that she wanted to be the one to place her Aunt Lauria's ornaments on it. She promised her grandmother, "I will do it. I will help you." Model. The story of Lauria and Ashley is a haunting reminder that while evil may spark a fire, it is the unwavering strength of the human spirit that eventually brings the truth to light. This tragedy carries a profound lesson. Justice is not a gift, it is a battle. When the systems designed to protect us failed, it wasn't the official badges that broke the silence, it was a mother's unshakable resolve. Lorene Bible's journey teaches us that silence is the greatest accomplice to cruelty. For decades, the truth was held captive by fear, hidden in a lost evidence box, and the closed lips of witnesses. We learn that speaking up even years later is the only way to dismantle the darkness. Beyond the mystery, there is a call to protect what matters most. In an age where our privacy is fragile and our children's safety is paramount, we must be the guardians of our own fortresses. But most importantly, this story is about legacy. By turning a crushing void into Lauria and Ashley's law, a family ensured that their pain would become a shield for others. The takeaway? Never stop looking, never stop caring, and never let a memory fade. Because the moment we stop searching for the lost, we lose a piece of our own humanity.